Where can you do it? You can do it abroad. So the SS from 33 to 39 is mainly doing things not in Germany. It's mainly doing things that are preparing it for a state-destructive mission abroad. So again, all the things that we know about the SS make more sense, I think, when we think about them in that setting. All of these hybrid institutions, the most familiar is the Einsatzgruppe, but there are also the high SS and police leaders, the Reichssicherheitshauptamt itself. All of these are institutions which bring together state institutions and racial institutions into a kind of hybrid, which none of them can do very much in Germany. But abroad, all of those institutions will have rather horrifying and dramatic effects. The concentration camps, right? The history of the concentration camp in Germany itself in the 1930s is a rather modest business. It's interesting, though, for what it portends, because a concentration camp, as we all know from recent memory as well, a definition of a concentration camp is a lawless zone. Right? It's a lawless zone inside Germany in the 30s. From 1939, there are going to be much bigger lawless zones, where people are going to die on the scale of whole countries in much the same way that they die inside concentration camps. The next innovation, and again this is something familiar which I'm just asking you to think about in a different way, is the globalization of Jewish politics. So what Hitler was able to do in the course of the 1930s is to persuade Germans to think of German Jews, and I'm abbreviating huge, wonderful books like Peter Longwick's book. He's able to get Germans to think of German Jews not as Germans, but as elements of a much broader thing called world Jewry. A German Jew is neither a German or an individual, but an element of this much larger thing. Now, the reason that this is important, of course, inside Germany is apparent, at least the progressive separation of Germans from Jews and so on. But again, it's more important abroad because of this. And they are openly and increasingly anti-Semitic. So Pilsudski's policies are also policies of civic equality for Jews. He also opens up the Jewish commune, all these sorts of things. Pilsudski's obsession is with the state. Everything Pilsudski does is with the goal of trying to preserve a conventional state. Now, the very first moment where the Pilsudski regime and the new Hitler regime have something to consider together comes in 1933. Let me try to get this across as briefly as I can, but it's very important. In 1933, as Pilsudski is aging and already is ill, and precisely as Hitler is coming to power, another model of state building, so to speak, comes between them. And that is the Soviet model of state building. 1933 is the year, as I'm sure you all remember, of the Great Famine in Soviet Ukraine, which is one of these events that, you can deny it now if you want, but in 1933 you couldn't deny it. In 1933, when some of the richest farmland in Europe was racked by an artificial famine which killed millions of people, it wasn't the sort of thing you could overlook. I mean, like many historical events, like the Holocaust itself, if you have lots of bad faith, you can overlook it in retrospect. But at the time, it was something to which Poland and Germany had to take a position. And that's why that's why I mention it here. Hitler had to take a position because, of course, Ukraine is at the absolute center of Hitler's fantasies of creating a German empire. The whole point of the move to the east, the whole center of gravity of Lebensraum is Ukraine, the fertile soil of Ukraine, which really is fertile, by the way. I mean, if you look at grain exports from last year, after the US, Canada, and Brazil, what's next? Ukraine, the fourth in the world, 20 times more than Russia, right? It really is fertile soil. And fertile soil is something, by the way, that we're going to be caring about more and more in the years to come, rather than less and less. So it's Hitler's obsession. Hitler's obsession is that Germany is going to become a major, autarkic, self-sufficient empire with the help of Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine is also a place that Poles can't help but care about. It's been part of their history for 500 years. It's where they fought a war against the Soviets in 1919 and 1920. When starving Ukrainian refugees pour across the Polish border, they're asking for a war against the Soviet Union in the tens of thousands. That's not the kind of thing you can actually ignore, right? So both sides have to take a position on this. And what I want you to notice is how the position was different. In Poland, up until 1933, there had been a certain attempt to decolonialize the Soviet Union. There had been a certain attempt using Polish espionage resources, I wrote a different book about this, to use the national question, and especially the Ukrainian question, to undermine the integrity of the Soviet Union. The famine of 1933 gave the Polish leaders pause. They thought, first of all, this state doesn't seem to be just a renewed Russian empire. It seems to be something else that perhaps we don't understand. And they also thought, we might in some way be implicated in this. I mean, for one thing, Stalin was blamed, right? So the Polish presence in the Soviet Union made the Poles feel that perhaps they were in some way morally implicated with what was happening. Hitler's reaction was exactly the opposite, as I'm sure some of you know. Hitler was the European leader who did the most to publicize the famine in the Soviet Union, which is the main reason why it's controversial now. He used the Soviet Union as a major argument in his electoral propaganda against the Social Democrats and the Communists in Germany in 1932 and 1933. The argument going, if you vote for the left, you're going to get communism, you're going to starve. It's a pretty powerful argument for middle-class Germans. It probably helped them rather a lot. Well, that's another story. So the reaction is quite different. What it leads to is that it leads the Poles and the Germans, ironically, to come together. Poland pulls back from its rather adventurous policies in the Soviet Union. It signs a treaty of non-aggression with the Soviet Union. And then, in order to assure the Soviet Union, or to assure the Germans that this is not directed against them, it signs a declaration of non-aggression with Germany in January of 1934. And the policy of Poland for the rest of the way is going to be to try to balance between these two powers, not to allow either one. From the German point of view, from Hitler's personal point of view, the declaration with Poland is a step towards the Soviet Union. You see, the Poles are stepping away, the Germans are stepping towards. This arrangement with Poland is going to be a first step towards intervention in the Soviet Union itself. Now, what you're probably asking, are all of these crazy adventurous Poles who've been carrying out espionage operations in the Soviet Union going to do after they leave Ukraine? Where will their minds turn after that? If they're interested in breaking up empires, it's the world's responsibility to solve this problem, i.e. somebody somewhere else in the world is going to have to take our Jews. And that's a pretty big alteration in policy. Now, it's the world's responsibility.